The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever part of the world you're in. Hello out there. Okay, we got some couple of smiling faces at you, looking at you. This Professor Richard Felder and Dr. Rebecca Brent with us, and just to show you quickly my screen. Okay, so yours. I think you are seeing my screen already. So you're not seeing the what I wanted you to see right now, which is this screen here. Okay, so that's the introduction. You have received this by email. The topic is very exciting, very important topic for anybody in the world, helping new engineering faculty members get their careers off to a good start. And we have Rebecca Brent, from President of Education Designs Incorporated, North Carolina, and Professor Richard Felder, Celanese Professor Emeritus of Chemical Engineering, North Carolina State University. So without wasting any time, because I know you're a lot excited to wait to hear from them, I'm going to make them the presenters, and you can see them. And after a little while, we'll probably have them not show themselves, because then you can focus on the presentation a little bit more. Okay, so you can click show my screen. Fantastic. Yep, slideshow mode, and keep going. You're on.
All right, great. Well, we are so delighted to be with you today. This is a topic that is near and dear to our hearts, helping new engineering faculty, or some of you may call them staff, get their careers off to a good start. Before I go too far, I just want to let you know that a lot of the information we'll be sharing with you, and many links to additional articles and places to find out more information, will be on, the addresses will be on the last slide, and there's a special handout just for this webinar where you can get a lot of information at the end. So don't worry about that. You'll have a lot more places to go. When we think about helping new faculty get off to a good start, sometimes people wonder, well, why focus on new faculty? And especially when we're thinking about teaching. And there's several important reasons. One is that we found they are generally receptive to those types of methods that we're trying to get more people to use with teaching. Active engagement, writing good learning objectives so that it's very clear what we want students to do. And faculty who have been around for a while get a little set in their ways sometimes and may not be as open to these new ideas. But new faculty come in and they know they don't know much about teaching, if anything, and so they are much more open and can help further the kinds of goals that we all have for teaching in our universities.
One unique thing about the profession that we've all gotten ourselves into is that it's probably the only skilled profession in existence that doesn't routinely train its practitioners before they go out to work. And new faculty are conscious of the fact that nobody has taught them how to teach or how to start and build a research program and so forth. So they're generally quite open to new ideas and trying new things.
In addition, we know that the small interventions that we make to help people get started on the right foot, do things that are going to get their research and teaching going, can prevent big problems down the road. Having problems with your teaching, having problems getting your research started can derail you as a new faculty member. So it's really important to make these small steps to get them started. It's not everything they need to know, but it is a good start. And then finally, we know research has shown that it really works, and that's important. We want to share one person who has done more work than anyone about new faculty, and that is Robert Boyce. His most open book, or the book that most people know about, is called Advice for New Faculty Members. He wrote some additional ones, but one of the questions he looked at over a lot of different campuses in the United States was, he looked at, well, how long does it take for people to reach full productivity in their research, if that's a part of what they're required to do, and full effectiveness in teaching. And he found that most faculty take 4 to 5 years 95% of them take 4 to 5 years to get up to full effectiveness. That's a really long learning curve. But the exciting thing was that he found that quick starters, about 5%, got up to speed in 1 to 2 years. They really, in the vernacular of the United States, they hit the ground running. They were ready to go, and they got just good success early on.
This is a really important result. In the United States, this is going to be different in other locations, but in the United States, they figured that every new faculty member that the university hires, the university ends up investing about $1 million in to help them get started and set up labs and so forth. And if you can take 3 years off the learning curve to become fully productive in research and fully effective in teaching, that's a tremendous return on investment.
So the question is, can we take that 95% of new faculty who may be slower to get started and turn them into quick starters, get them further along the path? And the answer is yes, or we wouldn't be here this morning with you. But the question then is, how do we do it? And we're going to be sharing a couple of important big ways that you can get new faculty off to a good start.
Now, they're going, should say before I start going through this schematic, that we're going to be looking for questions from you. There's a chat facility in this software that we're working with. So if you have a question at any time, go ahead and enter it. And periodically we'll be stopping and responding to the questions that we get. So here is the model that we're going to be overviewing in the time we have together today. And it goes something like this. They're the university and college and the new faculty members department. And there's the new faculty member in the middle. Resources come from both the institution and at the department level. And they can come in the form of incentives to the new faculty members to do different things that can improve their effectiveness and productivity, support for them while they're doing these things, and rewards for doing them well. And they come to the new faculty member from 3 different directions. One of them is in the form of workshops and learning communities for the new faculty members to help them get started in their careers. And we'll be talking momentarily about workshops, orientation workshops, to get them off to a good start. Incentives, support, and rewards can also come in the form of providing mentoring to new faculty members in both research and teaching, and integrating into the campus culture. And then finally, resources can come directly from the institution and the department to the new faculty. The net effect of these resources is that new faculty members turn into quick starters. And then we'll be providing details for each of those as we go through the next hour.
What we want to do now is launch a poll. We want to ask you about your first year engineering or STEM faculty members and whether they get orientation. Let's see.
Should I launch? I'm going to launch it right now. Okay.
Yes. Let's launch it. So we want to know whether your first year faculty members get some sort of orientation that includes effective teaching. You can select no if there's nothing that happens. Yes, if it's a campus-wide program so that people from all disciplines come together. The third bullet, if it is a STEM or an engineering specific program, and if it's both B and C, you can choose the last one. And we'll give you just a few moments to make selections, and thank you. We see a lot of you are already responding.
Yeah, there are about 65 people, and 2/3 of them have already voted, and you can actually see the results in that top region.
Yes, great. So as we look at that, Krishna, can they see the results too, or not yet?
Yeah, no, we will show them in just a minute. Once we
Okay,
decide
great.
to stop the poll, then I will share it with them. So right now they
Great.
cannot. Once I close it and share it, then they will do it. So I'm waiting for. It's been a minute and 80% have voted. Maybe that should be enough, right? 81%.
Yep, that's fine.
Yeah, we can stop there.
So what I noticed is,
and I will share it. Yeah, now I'm sharing it, and you can see the results on the screen, and that's yeah.
great. Okay, so what we see is pretty typical. We were not sure how this poll would come out, given that it's a very international audience. But this is about typical for what we see in a lot of places. So about a third of you, now a little less than a third of you, have nothing for those first-year engineering faculty members to get them started. It's a little bit more of a sink or swim. And then about a little more than a third say that you have a campus-wide program. And then about a fourth say a STEM or engineering specific program. And then 13% of you say that you have both. So that's great. What we're going to be talking about in particular is the value of an engineering specific program that may be in addition to what is done at the campus, or it may stand alone. You can do it in either way. Yeah,
one thing that poll tells me is that some countries outside the United States are ahead of the United States in terms of providing engineering specific faculty development. I noticed that there were roughly a quarter or more of the respondents who were doing it at their institutions. And I don't think it would be quite that high in our country.
Yeah, so that's great. Well, let's go on now, and we want to go back to our slides. And so let us tell you a bit about orientation, and then a little bit more about continuing faculty development, to give you an idea about the kinds of things that we recommend and that are recommended by Boyce in getting people off to a really good start. And we particularly are thinking about their teaching, but we also try to look at the total career development of new faculty. And in many places, research is an important part of what they are being asked to do. And so that is a portion of the orientation program as well. Some of you may be in institutions where there's mainly a teaching focus. And if that's the case, then you would put your emphasis on teaching as the main thing you would do. So what I want to share with you is that a model program at North Carolina State University. And we'll just describe it, and you can think about how you might take elements of this or adapt for your own situation. This is a workshop that has taken place since 2000. So it's had a long history now, and it's one that is given 4 days, in 4 days, and it's usually a couple of weeks before the beginning of the fall semester, when most of the new faculty members begin their work. The first part of it is focused strictly on teaching, and it's really survival skills in many ways, but it's very interactive with the new faculty doing a lot of hands-on things. The topics included are the learning process, so how do students learn? What can cognitive science tell us about that? Course planning, writing a syllabus, writing objectives so that you know what you want students to be able to do. This is news to many new faculty, how that works and how putting a course together, how it can all hang together to be an effective course. And in addition to that, thinking about how do we assess learning. One of the problems for many new faculty is the first exams they give may be much harder than they should be. They don't really necessarily hit that mark of where students are. And so we try to prevent that train wreck that can sometimes happen by giving them some tools for assessment. We talk about lecturing, but in the context of bringing in activity. So lecturing and active learning, engagement. How do we do that? How do we make sure our students really are learning those things that we want them to learn? And then classroom management and advising. Students sometimes are disruptive in class, or sometimes they have other problems that they bring to us in our offices. And it's useful to think about, what do we do? What are the resources?
And again, it's important to remember that nobody has taught most of these new faculty members how to do any of those things. And so the only model they have for how does one teach is the way that their teachers taught them. But nobody taught their teachers how to do it either. And so the ineffective methods that have been in place for centuries just keep being perpetuated.
We try to do a lot with individual course planning, so that as they're writing exercises about a certain topic, active learning exercises, or as they're writing objectives, it's for the first course they're going to teach. So it puts them right into having practical ideas. Because our faculty also conduct research, we look at research in a couple of the days of the workshop, thinking about how you get started, choosing what you're going to do, getting funding, which is a huge issue in the United States, and dealing with common problems that happen as you try to attract graduate students, as you work with them in your labs and so forth. So this, we try to also be very hands-on. So they're looking at proposal descriptions and summaries, and they're critiquing them. There's a mock panel. They do a lot of things that help them to understand that research process, and to think about setting up the program that that's gonna make them successful going forward. The final set of categories is all the way through is the culture of the campus and how you really balance your priorities. And we keep in mind that personal life is important too, not just the things that are a part of their professional life. So time management, campus culture, what are the resources, where do you go for help? And in most of our universities, and NC State is no exception, tenure and promotion is on people's minds. And so we have a panel of deans and department heads to talk about that and how they can be successful.
The presenters in the workshop on the 4 days, Rebecca and I have for all of these years done the teaching part of it. The research part of it is done by some of the top researchers on the campus. And then on the last day, when we're talking about the campus culture, the pictures that you're looking at on the screen, that's the Dean of Engineering, Louis Martin Vega, addressing them on the whole idea of tenure and promotion. The next picture is Dan Solomon, who was the Dean of the College of Sciences at the time. And then some top researchers from the campus are doing a panel talking about how they started and built their research programs. And then the reception is down at the bottom right of the screen.
So this is all designed to make these new faculty feel that they're a part of the community, that they know what the resources are, but in a very practical, sort of hands-on way. We have some assessment of this work.
So we, at the end of every workshop, at the end of the 4 days, we ask the participants to rate their experience, and 88% give it a rating of excellent, the top rating, 12% good, and in all of these years with 238 responses, we have never had a response rating the workshop as anything less than good. In the first 3 years, we did a little research study in which we looked at people who had attended the workshop, new faculty who had come to the workshop, and we looked at their research productivity and teaching effectiveness. Research productivity is measured by how many proposals did they write and get funded, and teaching effectiveness, we used student ratings of teaching, and we compared the ones who went to the workshop with the ones who chose not to go to the workshop. And what we found is that the ones who attended the workshop were statistically significantly higher than the ones who chose not to go to it in research productivity, in their teaching evaluations, and in how they rated their orientation sometime after the workshop was over. How do you feel about the way you were oriented to the university? And the ones who went to the workshop, again, statistically significantly greater than the non-attendees. So we did that in the first couple of years, and after we did that, we could no longer do that research study. The results were so positive that the department heads, the associate deans, and the experienced faculty members became the main recruiters for the workshop. A new faculty member would come and say, I'm just getting ready to start my first semester in this career, and you want me to spend 4 days going to a workshop? And once the results from the first 3 years were in, the dean, the department heads, the experienced faculty said, yes, I know you don't want to go, it'll be worth your time. And then there's a contrast between the STEM specific workshops, like the one that we just described to you, the ones that were specifically for engineering and science new faculty, versus the usual campus-wide workshop where everyone across the campus, from engineering, science, humanities, social sciences, all came to the same program. And there are some significant differences between the STEM specific workshops and the campus-wide workshops. The ones that are STEM specific place a heavy emphasis on how do you teach effectively and how do you start and build a research program. And this, we call this just-in-time orientation, because they're getting ready to start in their first semester, and that's exactly when they need to hear about how do you teach and how do you start a research program. The campus-wide workshop, there's generally little or nothing on teaching and research. What normally happens in these campus-wide workshops is the provost or somebody will get up and welcome to them to the university, say, we're delighted to have you here, and they'll talk some about what we do in the provost's office is this, and they tell them something about their retirement benefits and their health benefit programs and the importance of safety on campus and so forth. The two topics that they don't really talk about are teaching and research, and the reason is because they really can't. What you need to tell engineering faculty about how to teach effectively and give them examples of how to do it and how to start and build a research program, and what you would tell a sociology professor are much, much different, and as a consequence, those topics tend to be ignored. The consequences of that are the STEM specific workshops or engineering specific workshops. The STEM faculty go to them in fairly large percentages now, and they receive them well, and they're open to the ideas. Campus-wide workshops, engineering faculty tend to avoid them. Some go, many don't, and they're not all that receptive to the ideas. The STEM-specific workshops tend to have a great impact on the STEM faculty member performance, and that little research study we talked about illustrates that. Their teaching did improve a lot, as did their start on their research program, whereas on the campus-wide workshops, they generally don't even bother to assess what impact did this workshop have.
You can certainly do other things to help new faculty get off to a good start. A more intensive workshop before they begin is a great beginning, but there are a lot of other things that you can do and should do. Follow-up sessions specifically for new faculty on particular topics help them to come together, build their own network of new faculty, and learn about topics that you might not have had time for, or that they only really can appreciate once they've been teaching and doing their work for a while. Shorter workshops and seminars, some of these may be the kinds of things you're already doing for the larger groups of faculty. New faculty can be encouraged to come into those topic-focused learning communities where maybe you say, okay, we want to think about using technology to get more student engagement, or we want to think about how to better form teams and work with them. So topic focused learning communities of faculty coming together to learn about a particular topic can be a very effective technique, and that can continue throughout our careers, not just for new faculty. And then finally, there may be a need for groups that may be underrepresented. In the United States, that tends to be women in engineering, and also we have some underrepresented minorities who benefit from getting together across department lines and meeting and talking about some of the issues that they're facing. So this is a kind of menu of a lot of different things you can do for faculty development that are helpful for new faculty.
The one other category in that last line is teaching faculty, and that refers to campuses where at research universities, it's becoming more common in the United States now to hire faculty members specifically to focus on teaching. Research is not an expectation unless it's educational research, and those faculty members can benefit from networking with each other to provide mutual support.
So now we're going to pause for some questions about that first part, about the workshops and the orientation. We'll be talking about mentoring in just a few minutes, but we want to see if you have some questions. Feel free to put them into the box for questions, and we'll turn it over to Krishna to see if we have some questions.
Fantastic. Thank you. Encourage everybody. I see there are more than 80 people with us right now. And I see a few familiar names. I think there's some of them might be go back to your visit to India in 2008 and 2009.
Oh, wonderful.
I think one or two or three at least are people who had been to your workshop, so they probably saw your name and said, "Wow, I'm gonna come to this webinar and catch up on the two of you." So come in and give your questions, gang. We're gonna wait for a little bit and see see what you have. One question did come up. It says, how do you keep students engaged and make them participate?
How do you keep the students in classes or new faculty members?
I guess he's just talking about the students in classes, I think. So how to keep students engaged and make them participate?
You give them things to do. And that's a simple answer, but it's the basic idea of active learning. So if I'm in a traditional lecture, that's mainly me talking for 50 minutes or 75 minutes at a time, and the students sitting there passively receiving information. And we have lots and lots of research saying that not much learning happens in that kind of an environment. But for example, suppose I'm taking my students in my engineering class on chemical reaction engineering or the introductory chemical engineering course, and I'm taking them through a worked out example of solving a problem. In a traditional approach, I would just work out the whole solution on slides or on a document camera, and they would be taking notes, either that or they wouldn't. Instead of doing that, I may set up the problem, state the problem, and instead of then starting on the solution, I might tell the students to get into groups of 2 or 3 where they're sitting and say, I'll give you 2 minutes working in 2s and 3s. See how far you can get in getting the solution to this problem started. And then I'll give them how much time I want to give them, stop them, and then call on a couple of them to say, okay, Joe, how did you get started with the solution? Sally, what did you do next? And so I'm getting the answer from them, and I'm writing it down on the board or on a document camera for them to see. And then I stop them, and I make some comments on their solution and continue with some simple steps and get to the difficult part, and then say, okay, back in your groups. Take another minute or 2 minutes, see how far you can get in completing this next step. And we go through the problem that way. And some of the groups get it when I give them the 2 minutes. And if they get it, they own it. If they just watch me do it, they're not getting it at all. It looks simple when I do it, but then when they go home and try it, they can't. But if they struggle for that 2 minutes, if they get it, then they understand it. If they don't get it, it's going to make a lot more sense when the answer comes out to them. And I get them engaged. all right? Maybe 1 or 2 students are not participating. The rest of the class is actively involved.
So if at the end of this webinar, when we put the resources there, there is a website that is for effective teaching. And if you go there, if you don't know much about these sorts of techniques, there is a whole section on active learning, practical tips, ways to do it. And the way that this connects to what we're talking about now is that that's exactly what we want new faculty to understand how to do. We want to help them to really be able to put that in practice, those active learning strategies. And the way we do that is by using it with them. So we get them engaged in small group activities, talking about tasks, writing objectives, giving each other feedback on those objectives and so forth. The kinds of things that are really important to the workshop learning, then they can take that. We also show them examples of the technique being used in engineering. And so all of that enables them to go out and be able to answer that question that you have. They know how, at that point, how to get students engaged. Are there other questions, Krishna?
Yeah, there are lots of. In fact, if you click on the questions thing, you'll see some. But I'll pick a few. A lot of them are more about how to engage with the students. But there's one here on how would you actually conduct such a workshop, and you're given the list of things to do in the workshop. But the mechanics, the logic, and how you set it up, and so on. Is there something that you advise you can give on how to actually conduct such a workshop that you're talking about?
Well, the real key is, as Rebecca just said, is you practice what you preach. If we want our new faculty members to do active learning, we do active learning with them. If we want them to write learning objectives and use them to guide everything they do in their course, then we have them write learning objectives for their course and so on. In terms of the logistics of the workshop, obviously it needs a lot of support from the administration. It costs something to put on a workshop. You've got to pay the facilitators something. You need to provide food. Vitally important to have food in any program that you do for faculty. And so all of those arrangements need to be made. An important point to note, though, is that remember why we're doing this. Boyce found that new faculty members could cut 3 years off their learning curve in teaching and research. And if you consider how much is invested in new faculty members, that's a tremendous amount of benefit, financial benefit to the university. And so the cost of putting on a workshop, paying facilitators, buying lunch and so forth, is totally trivial compared to the benefits that you get to the new faculty and the institution when you put a program on like this.
As far as logistics go, too, it involves making sure that as soon as someone is engaged to come in, say, the fall semester, that you get them information that is sent out to them, get them registered, give them information about what's going to happen as you're also getting all the things finalized. We use a lot of faculty who come in for just some short presentations or panels on particular topics, particularly in the research section. So they get to know different people on campus. But it's important to always have somebody who is there for the whole time so that you have a lot of continuity. You can bring up things that you might have mentioned on the first day and someone says something about it on the third day that is related to it. You can bring up those connections to help the whole thing hang together. Anyone who is really looking to put something like this together can certainly contact one of us for examples of a schedule and some tips. We also have in the resources that you are going to be given some more specifics about how the workshops might be put together. So we are very open to giving you more details should you need them.
Another question.
Krishna? got any additional? Oh, I wonder if we've.
Yeah, there are several more questions. Let me just do, how many more do you want to do? That's the question. So,
We'll do a couple more.
yeah.
We're doing fine on time.
okay, great. Yeah, so the other question, another question here is, how would you assess how these faculty development programs are working? That's an issue I myself face, and my team who's trying to get faculty members to come to these workshops. You're not quite sure how to assess these programs are working or not. So can you give us a little tips on that?
Right. The assessment that you can conduct, first of all, at the end of the workshop, you survey the participants to ask them how they would rate the workshop, what did they find particularly useful, what would they have liked to see more of, and so forth. And so right after the workshop, you get a feeling for what worked well and what might be improved. But then a more important one is to follow up afterwards. If the workshop is focusing on teaching, then you look at their teaching evaluations. If you're using student ratings, then you have them share their ratings with you. And to see if they had taught previously, to check and see whether their ratings improved after the workshop. If you're using peer ratings in your institution, you can look at the effect of the workshop on their peer ratings before and after, if they have taught previously. Otherwise, just get a feeling for how their peer ratings look if they're new.
Another thing that you can do is something that we did with the National Effective Teaching Institute that we were both involved with for a number of years, that is sponsored by the American Society for Engineering Education. And with that workshop, which drew people from all over the country and sometimes even from other countries as well, was we did a retrospective survey of people who had been through the workshop. And we have a paper that details that. And when you go back and ask people about what specific things they were using from the workshop, whether they attributed their use of that to the workshop, where they look back and evaluate what they learned from the workshop, you can get a good sense of how participants feel about what was done. And you can also ask them whether their ratings changed, went up, went down, stayed the same, those kinds of questions. It's not as rigorous as getting the actual numbers from people, but it gives you a good proxy for what has happened. And if you're interested in that survey and what that might look like that you could adapt, there's a paper that details it. And again, we're always happy to share those materials with people who need them. Let's go ahead and talk about mentoring, and then we'll take some more questions before the end of the workshop, the webinar.
Thank you for your questions. Those were good.
Great. What we want to do now is to think a bit about mentoring, which is, we all kind of know in a vague way about mentoring, having someone, a senior person who works with a new faculty member and provides additional ideas and support. It's a kind of one-on-one experience. Going back to North Carolina State, I want to share with you, a number of years ago, conducted 2 surveys/interviews. We had 10 engineering department heads and 13 new engineering professors one year. And so for the first, the engineering department heads, I asked them, how are your new faculty members mentored in your department? You know, what happens? And I asked the new engineering professors, have you been mentored and how? Their answers were very different. When I asked the department heads, they said, oh yes, I am involved, and our senior faculty members provide advice and support. We take our new faculty members under our wing. We look after them. We provide a lot of advice and support. And that is not what the new engineering professors said. When I went to them and asked them about how they had been mentored, almost half of them said, I wasn't mentored. I didn't get any mentoring. Another almost half said it was very little or poor quality. I couldn't really trust anything that was said to me. It was a mess. And then one said, I had a good senior faculty mentor who helped me. So obviously that is a very, the perceptions of those two groups was very, very different. And if you think about your own departments, I would venture to guess that you'd have a similar story in many cases, because often department heads and senior faculty think that they're providing advice and support, and that's not how the new professors perceive it.
Just a little side story about this. We gave a workshop to the administration in the College of Engineering at North Carolina State, to the executive committee. So the dean, the associate deans, and the department heads were all at this workshop. And the first thing we did was tell them about this pair of surveys. And it came as a total shock to the department heads, all of whom thought that, oh, we're doing a good job of that, taking care of our new faculty. And when they found out that the new faculty didn't perceive it that way, one of the end results of that discovery was that they came up with the idea of the new faculty orientation program that we described to you before.
Many of those departments have also adopted mentorship, and Rich is going to talk with you about the models, and then we're going to ask you about what happens in your departments for new faculty members.
So there are several different ways that you can do mentoring in a department. And I'm talking about a formal mentoring program, not just, you know, getting together for coffee one day and chatting about something, but a serious mentorship. It can be built on research. And a very effective way of doing research mentoring is that the new faculty member collaborates with an experienced faculty member who's an expert researcher and a very successful one, and they do a joint project in which they plan what they're going to do, they identify a funding source, they write a proposal to get funding for it, they do the research, they manage the graduate student, and they publish papers. In the end, it can go on for a couple of years, but now the new faculty member is seeing an expert doing the entire process, and you can learn more in that by just watching what he or she is doing than you can in any number of other ways of doing it. You can do the same thing around teaching. And now the new faculty member and one of the top teachers in the department can co-teach a course or can teach parallel sections of the same course and work together. Initially, for the first part of the course, it's the experience, the mentor, doing a lot of the work, planning lessons and doing the lecturing and making up exams and assignments and so forth. And then they meet every week and debrief, talk about what happened and what went well and what could have been done better. And then as the course continues, more and more of the burden of it is shifted to the new faculty member, to the mentee, who ends up doing most of it. Initially, the mentee is sitting in on the mentor's lectures and observing and making notes. And then it shifts as the course goes on. The mentee is doing most of the lecturing. At the end of the semester, that mentee has learned an incredible amount about how do you teach effectively by simply watching and discussing it every week. And then the mentorship is over and the mentee goes off on their own, but now they have really been prepared to teach, unlike most people who enter this profession.
Often when mentors are assigned, a new faculty member will get one mentor, and that mentor is expected to sort of help with the research and the teaching. Often that's not a very valuable thing because not everyone is a great researcher and a great teacher. And so don't be afraid to have those functions split so that somebody would have two mentors, one really focused on the research if that's an expectation, and one on the teaching. You can use a lot of different variations. You might have somebody who's particularly good at some aspect the job, like a really good writer who could give feedback on proposals or papers. That's something that can be helpful to everybody, every new person in the department. You might do some formative evaluation where somebody comes in, a senior faculty member, and observes teaching and talks with the new faculty member specifically about improving their teaching, not in a formal mentorship, but in a kind of formative evaluation process. And then peer support, where pairs or triads or squares of faculty, senior and junior faculty, observe each other's classes and give each other feedback. What we'd like you to do now is to take the second poll, where we find out about how your department might handle mentoring. And let's see, I think I can launch it. And the question is, are first-year engineering faculty members given structured mentoring on effective teaching, in particular teaching? You can say no, yes, by senior department colleagues, yes, by non-STEM consultants outside of the department. That might be people from a teaching center, or both A and C. B and C, sorry. So let's take just a couple of minutes. I see some of you have already voted. That's terrific. It's I'm seeing that more than half of you are saying no, that there's not structured mentoring on effective teaching. And if you're in that category, you're not alone. If you look at many places where we've gone to work with folks on supporting new faculty, that is a common story. So, so if you're in that category of not having that be done, you're not alone. The good news about mentoring, though, is that it really does not require a huge amount of financial support. It's really a matter of departments making a decision that this is important and putting that in place. So even if you aren't seeing that at all in your department, this is something you can go back and with very little investment. It's a major service when someone is a mentor. And it should count as service, but it's not expensive. It's a matter of making that choice. So you can see the results, that there are lots of you that don't have that in place, and about a quarter of you say, and I guess it would be close to half, have some form, and 28% of you say senior department colleagues. So that's great.
Now, if our experience is any indication, some at least who think that senior department colleagues are doing mentoring could be wrong.
All right, so what we'll do now is give you a little bit more information about what we know from research about the effects of mentoring, and then we'll take some of your questions. So if you've got questions about mentoring, feel free to put those in while we give you this last information.
So the people who have studied mentoring and have gone back to the people who were mentored and asked them afterwards, what did it do for you? It's found that it increases research productivity if there's mentoring on research. They're getting more projects done and getting more publications out of it. If they're mentored in teaching, their student evaluations go up. They are more successful in getting tenure and promotion if they're in institutions that operate in that way than they would be if they had not been mentored. A sense of social isolation and stress and having been thrown into the deep end of the pool when they started their careers goes down dramatically if they have the experience of being mentored. And in the long run, their job satisfaction, career satisfaction, and satisfaction with the institution that they're working at go up significantly as a consequence of the mentoring.
We know some things from the research on mentoring. It has not been highly researched, but there have been some studies, and there are a lot of materials out there to talk about what we know about mentoring. One really important idea is that having multiple mentors, several people, more than one person mentoring you, leads to greater benefits. And so there might be a couple of mentors within the department, and then a new faculty member might have a mentor in another department, someone that they connect with, or they may have someone from their old institution. Never be worried that somebody's going to have too many mentors. Multiple mentors are associated with greater benefit. Women and minorities or underrepresented groups, you identify who those underrepresented people are in your own institution, and that varies from country to country, of course. But those people who are underrepresented are the least likely to get informal mentoring. Informal mentoring means nobody's assigned, that everybody just tries to help the new person. And with those underrepresented folks, they often get left out. So being proactive and making a real structure for at least that first year can be incredibly important for the success of those faculty. Mentors often need encouragement to intervene. It's great and fun to mentor somebody who's doing beautifully, who doesn't need us. It's a lot harder when somebody's having trouble, when they're struggling with their teaching or they're struggling with their research. And so mentors may need some encouragement and some training. And that is something that once you put in place mentorship across, say, a whole college or university, giving mentors some training about what to do and how to intervene can be helpful. And there are a lot of good books available and good articles available to give ideas. And then finally, one of the most important lessons from the research is just simply that the most important thing for mentors and mentees is to meet regularly, even if there's not a problem. What often happens is there's a flurry of activity at the beginning of the mentorship when the mentee has a lot of questions. And then as time goes by, they just stop meeting. And if you're meeting regularly, having coffee once a week, going to lunch every couple of weeks in a regular way, the relationship is built, and then the new faculty member is ready to ask questions when those questions come. So speaking of questions, let's see what questions you may have related to mentorship or anything that we've told you in the workshop.
Yeah, you can go back to the orientation if you still have a question about it.
Okay, question that's it's come up, and it's also something that I'm interested in. Is a lot of places have started centers for teaching and learning, okay, and in institutions. And so, if you do have the center of teaching and learning, how would you, what kinds of really efficient processes would you put in that center of teaching and learning in terms of both conducting these faculty orientation development workshop for new faculty as well as for mentoring? What kind of a structure? Do you have any examples of how that works?
Sure. There are a lot of teaching and learning centers and institutions in the United States, and that's where most of our experience is. They can take on different forms. Most of the time they do sponsor or lead workshops on particular topics related to teaching. And it's great to get all faculty members engaged in going to some of those activities. When they're, some of the campus centers will do discipline-specific activities as well, engineering-specific or the STEM, the sciences and mathematics and engineering. And those tend to be more effective than the ones that are campus-wide. But on some topics, campus-wide works well. Another thing that teaching and learning centers can do that is really helpful is consulting, so that they have people within the center who will go to a classroom and make observations and work with that faculty member on their teaching, help to coach them to improve their teaching. And so that can be an extremely valuable thing. And one final thing that a lot of centers do that you might want to think about if you're working with centers is getting student feedback. So about halfway through the semester or a few weeks into the semester, someone from the Teaching and Learning Center would go to to a classroom and gather feedback from the students on how the class is going, and then summarize that and help the faculty member to understand how they might improve the class for the remainder of the semester. So those three big categories are what most teaching and learning centers do. They can also be helpful in training mentors and in helping if people are wanting to start mentoring at their department level. Teaching and learning centers can be helpful in training, getting people ready to do that job well.
They can be extremely valuable, but they should be in addition to discipline-specific mentoring. I think only a really expert engineering professor can provide information on some aspects of teaching engineering. Similarly, and obviously with research, there's no substitute for an expert engineering researcher to provide mentoring in engineering research. So both is better than one or the other. Another question?
How about a structured training program for teaching, for mentoring teaching?
Yes, we have, it doesn't actually require a lot. It requires a couple of hours usually to have folks who are going to serve as mentors. They need to learn a little something about common mistakes that new faculty may make and how they can help them to avoid those mistakes. And that material is in a lot of the resources that we provide you at the end of this webinar. I think you also want to give the mentors some scenarios. You're working with someone, they have a problem with their teaching, what do you do? Sorts of scenarios so that they can really think about and get encouragement for how they might intervene and how they might coach effectively. And it doesn't really take a whole lot of effort, but just a couple of hours where people get a little bit of structure around what they can do.
It's also a good idea for whoever is coordinating the program to choose and help train the mentors. There are some people who would make perfect mentors. They're excellent teachers, for example, and they're interested in mentoring. There are others, obviously, you don't want to get a bad teacher to mentor somebody in teaching. Similarly with research. So I think an important part of structuring the program would be to make sure that the people who are mentors are the right people to do mentoring.
It's choosing good mentors, for sure.
Okay, a couple minutes.
We want to, we have a little bit to wrap up, and we'll take just a moment to do that.
So once again, I'm not going to go through all of this in detail, but what we have tried to persuade you is, first of all, that new quick starters are important. They're very valuable to the university and to the department. And if you take incentives and support and rewards and provide them to the new faculty in workshops, in mentoring programs, and in direct support, what the research shows and what Boyce has showed is that you can take the 5% who are normally new faculties when no such support is provided and increase the percentage who are quick starters by a significant amount.
The last thing that we're going to show, and we'll leave this up here for you, is the webinar resources. That link, educationdesignsinc.com, is our company website, and behind the slash, new STEM faculty good start is where the resource is. The websites down below, educationdesignsinc.com, has our blog, and if you're interested in knowing some of the things we're really interested in these days, you'll see a few blog entries there and other information as well. The last website that you see is Rich's website at North Carolina State University. So it's the North Carolina State entrance, www.ncsu.edu/effective_teaching. That's an underscore in between effective and teaching, and you can get to a lot of different articles. If you want things specific to new faculty, I think there is a pull down menu of topics, and new faculty and grad students is a topic. So you can find all the articles about that.
We really appreciate your spending the hour with us today, and we'll just conclude by wishing you the best of luck in your teaching and in your research.
Thank you so much, Richard and Rebecca. This was very interesting, very informative, I think, and many of the faculty members, I'm sure, have benefited from it. There were quite a few questions which I was not able to get to, which related directly to the effective teaching and learning issues, and I thought it's better to focus more on the faculty development program and the mentoring. So, but because all this webinar resources that you've shown will actually answer some of those questions that they have posed. So I encourage all the participants who had those kinds of questions that are directly related to teaching, to their own teaching, and to go to these websites. And I really appreciate your time. And any final comments from you, any of you?
I think you'll find that a lot of the questions that you raised about teaching and learning in general, you will find answers to them in these websites that we've put up for you.
And look for the topic active learning as the one that's most likely to have the resources you need.
Yes, a lot of those questions were related to that and to that topic. Thank you so much, Rich and Rebecca, and good night, good morning, good day, good evening to all the participants. We've had about 80 of them at most of the time, so thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
There will be a recording of this available very shortly, and it will be sent out to all the participants, and even those who could not attend it are we'll be more than happy to send them to you. So goodbye.
Goodbye.